الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and we're still discussing the Bab Kitab al-Tahara, where he mentioned in this chapter of Kitab al-Tahara, he mentioned matters pertaining to Bab Qada al-Haja. So we have started discussing this particular chapter that relates to things that one should take into consideration and also things that one should follow regarding fulfilling the call of nature. So as we mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, as I made the tahqiq of this book, I mentioned Bab Adab Qada al-Haja, by way of the etiquettes that one should follow and take into consideration when fulfilling the call of nature. So we read the first hadith, the hadith of Anas bin Malik, regarding this particular discussion. As for today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll discuss two other hadith, also by the same narrator, Anas bin Malik, rata'ala anhu. Aywa, so we have the hadith read, and then we go through discussing the hadith.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith 78, narrated Anas bin Malik radiallahu an. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, on entering the khala, lavatory, used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika minal khubthi wal khaba'ithi. O Allah, I seek refuge with you from devils, male and female, of all offensive and wicked things, evil deeds and evil spirits. Reported by As-Sab'a. Hadith 79, narrated Anas radiallahu anhu. Whenever Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam went to the khala to answer the call of nature, I and a small boy used to carry a leather hide container full of water and a spear-headed stick, and he, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would clean his private parts with the water. Agreed upon.
So these are two hadith that we'll be discussing inshallah ta'ala in this session. So the first hadith that is mentioned by Ibn Hajar anhu, so not mention name of the Sahabi who narrated this hadith. So he didn't mention the Sahabi name that mentioned the hadith. So he mentioned anhu, meaning the hadith, it goes back to the person that last mentioned the hadith that was before this. So the last previously mentioned hadith, then this hadith goes back to that narrator who's Anas bin Malik rata'ala anhu, where the hadith mentioned كان رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا دخل الخلاء قال اللهم inni bika minal khubthi والخبائث. Then he mentioned أخرجه As-Sab'a. As for the second hadith that it mentions, so the first hadith discussed concerning that what the person is to say before entering the place of the lavatory or the toilet. So before the person will leave themselves, what is to be said before the person start this act. Then as for the second hadith of Anas bin Malik, he called كان رسول الله عليه السلام يدخل الخلاء. The Prophet عليه السلام entered the khala فأحمل أنا غلام نحوي إداوة من الماء وأنزة فيستنجي بالماء متفق عليه. So those are the two hadith that are mentioned that we'll be discussing regarding matters that relate to of those adab, of those etiquettes relating to the call of nature. So as for the first hadith, that will make takrij of the first hadith with the hadith of Anas bin Malik. So as for the hadith, he mentioned أخرجه As-Sab'a. So the first hadith that discusses إذا دخل الخلاء, when you enter the khala, قال, then you should say such and such. As for this particular hadith, the author Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned أخرجه As-Sab'a. So As-Sab'a, that will include this hadith. That hadith can be found in Bukhari, in Sahih Muslim, in At-Tirmidhi, in Al-Jami', in Sunan Abu Dawud, also in Sunan An-Nasa'i, also Ibn Majah, and also Ahmed. So the hadith can be found in these 7 books. So As-Sab'a, Bukhari in his Sahih, Muslim in his Sahih, 3rd, At-Tirmidhi in his Al-Jami', 4th, Abu Dawud in his Sunan, 5th, Nasa'i in his Sunan, 6th, Ibn Majah in his Sunan, and 7th, which would be As-Sab'a, which would be Ahmed in his Al-Musnad. So the hadith can be found in those books of hadith. So also they said, in addition to the hadith, also you have Al-Bayhaqi, rahimahullah, I've mentioned this hadith. So the hadith is mentioned in those 7 books of hadith, and others I've mentioned this hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ, where Anas, on this hadith of Anas bin Malik, rata'ala anhu. So as for discussing the first hadith, of the points that to be discussed regarding the first hadith, that they discuss after this hadith regarding concern of Prophet Islam mentioned that kana yadkhul, that the first hadith that it mentions that it mentioned إذا دخل الخلاء. So we have mentioned before what is al-khala. That is the place of the lavatory that we call it today, or a person wish to relieve himself outdoors. So they mentioned regarding concern the Prophet Islam that khala is this place, that designated place where a person will go to relieve himself, whether that place is something which is indoor or outdoor, whether it is indoor or outdoor. So they mentioned regarding concerning that, so as today we know, the lavatory is sometime, or toilets are indoors, and also in some places that also the lavatory, the toilet, they're also outside the house. They're not inside the main building, but they're outside. And other places where people might have certain designated places where people would do such acts. So they mentioned regarding concern, so this hadith, so a taqreed of hadith we have mentioned. As for Anas bin Malik, we have spoken about him before previously, then that he was the one who would serve the Prophet ﷺ regarding certain chores, that he would assist the Prophet ﷺ as a young boy in certain things that the Prophet ﷺ would ask of his assistant, or he would give of his assistance in assisting the Prophet ﷺ in those things. So of those things regarding, he would observe of these things that the Prophet ﷺ does. So he mentioned regarding concerning that at what point, so he mentioned إذا دخل الخلاء. So the ulama have mentioned regarding, as mentioned by Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, that this particular hadith is to be mentioned, that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in his book Adab al-Mufrad, that he mentioned with another isnad of this hadith that goes back again to Abdul Aziz ibn Suhaib, قال حدثني أنس أن دا قال كان النبي عليه السلام إذا أراد أن يدخل الخلاء. So in other narration of hadith mentioned that إذا أراد, if the Prophet ﷺ wishes to enter the toilet, the lavatory, to relieve himself, then he will mention this dua. So it shows so they mention that this is to be said before entering or starting the act of relieving of oneself. So the person will say this before entering of the toilet. They mention regarding concern, so that's concerning of those matters. The second matter that they mention regarding of certain words of the hadith that they mention, so mention al-khala, that the Prophet says Allahumma. So Allahumma, it means regarding Ya Allah. So the Prophet, so this word Allahumma, what meant by this is Ya Allah. What is meant by this? Ya Allah. And as for Sheikh al-Bassam, that also he mentioned regarding concerning that, saying of this word Allahumma, that he state regarding this so Allahumma, that they mentioned regarding that it consists of all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sifat. So regarding concerning that, as he mentioned, that Asr al-Basr rahim wa qal, Allahumma hiya majma ad-dua. There's a form of dua that the person according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by saying Ya Allah regarding a thing that he wished to, either to supplicate or things of an adhkar, but presenting him, but making this request to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned huwa su'alullah, where the person is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bijami'a asmahihi wa sifati. So it's the person asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by saying Ya Allah, by saying Allahumma with all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes. So they mentioned that is a dua bi asma al-husna wa sifat al-ula, where the person making this supplication by addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all his names and attributes. So also they mentioned, regarding concern, they mentioned a'udhu bika. So a'udhu bika, what is meant by this concerning ittasam bik, that I'm seeking refuge with you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going back, I'm seeking refuge and aid with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against what will be mentioned after. So they mentioned regarding concerning that minal khubthi. So they mentioned that as for al-khubthi or khubthi, that khubuth, so al-khubuth, it can be pronounced two ways. Al-khubuth with al-kha wal-ba bid-damma. So al-kha and also ba, both are of the dhamma, khubuth. That's one way of pronouncing it. They mentioned concerning that, khubuth, it is the jam of khabith. So it's the jam, the plural. So to be the single of this would be khabith. And what is meant by this concerning that al-khabith in this context mean dhukran ash-shayateen. It will be the male of the shayateen. So al-khubuth would be the dhukran ash-shayateen. Wal-khaba'ith, the other word which is khaba'ith, then also that they mentioned, but khaba'ith mean khabitha. This would be, regarding concern, it would be unath ash-shayateen. It would be the female of the shayateen. So the word khubth, khubuthu, with both dhamma, fakha, and faba, it would mean dhukur ash-shayateen. Then I mentioned that as for al-khubthi, which would mean sukun al-ba. So the ba of a sukun, another pronunciation, that means concerned with khubth, mean concerning with iskan, al-ba mean ashar. It means things of evil. So you're seeking refuge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all evils. So wal khaba'ith, that also concerning that, so zawatil sharia, ashar, so is the person seeking refuge regarding things of evil. So is seeking evil from evil and the people of evil. From evil and those are the people are under those of the people who carry out of evil. So that's concerning that the author pronounced that word khubth or khubuth, both. So of the ulama who kind of somewhat, some of those some who more inclined towards one over the other, but overall both are allowed. Both pronunciation are both allowed as so that's both are allowed regarding that particular pronunciation. Then I mentioned that after points that mentioned that they made another point of this hadith that is mentioned regarding concerning mawdu of this hadith. So the mawdu, the topic of this hadith in relation to the bab of qada al-haja, is by way of the things that the person, what is to be said, the dhikr or the supplication to be said before the person start relieving of himself. So the person, before they enter into the toilet, the lavatory or the likes, what is to be said. Or they mentioned that this also would apply, so that the person enters into a physical building, then the person before he enters, that he will say the dua outside before entering. And also if the person is outdoors, then the person would say this supplication before he start to, as they mentioned, tashmir athiyab, before the person start to undo of his clothing. So the person, so those are the point that the person will say this dua. So this dua is in relation to what is to be said as a supplication before the person fulfilling the call of nature. So I mentioned regarding concern, it showed that from this hadith, it showed the permissibility of the person saying of this dua upon entering the place to relieve themselves, as the Prophet ﷺ he did, as the Prophet ﷺ did, as also in some hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned regarding the hadith in the Abu Dawud, also the hadith in the Ibn Majah Ahmed, and also the hadith they mentioned. The hadith is authentic, amongst them Shaykh Albani rahimahullah, authentic the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, فَإِذَا أَتَى أَحَدُكُمْ, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, إِذَا أَتَى أَحَدُكُمْ, if any of you come to this place, regarding concern a place to relieve himself, al-khala, فَلْيَقُلْ, then a person should say, فَلْيَقُلْ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ minal khubthi wal khaba'ith. أعوذ بالله من الخبث والخبائث. So the second narration, it doesn't mention Allahumma. So the first narration, the hadith of the bab that the author mentioned, that the author rahimullah mentioned, the hadith of Anas mentioned, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika minal khubthi wal khaba'ith. The other narration that we mentioned in the Abu Dawud, the hadith of Zayd ibn Arqam, this hadith of Zayd ibn Arqam, where the Prophet mentioned, inna hadihi hushush mustatara, that this place, that it is a place of the dwelling of the shaitan. Then they mention, فَإِذَا أَتَى أَحَدُكُمْ, if any of you were to come to this place, which they mention al-khala, to relieve oneself, فَقَالْ فَلْيَقُلْ, then he should say, أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الْخُبْثِ وَالْخَبَائِثِ. So it should also that this wording also can be said. So two wording, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubthi wal-kaba'ith. Or the person can say, as in the second hadith of Zayd ibn Arqam, a'udhu billah min al-khubthi wal-kaba'ith. So that's concerning this hadith. As for the ulama, they have a discussion between the ulama of majority of the ulama, that they take the position that as for the hukum in saying al-isti'adha before entering the toilet, I mentioned that they have mentioned that it is mustahab. They state that it's something which is mustahab for the person to do so. So majority of the ulama take the position that it is mustahab for a person to utter this dua upon entering the toilet. So they mention that also the person in this case, there's no difference in saying this dua whether the person is using a toilet that is indoors or outdoors, or there's no building. So it is permissible for the person to seek refuge, and by mention of this dua before upon using relieving of himself, whether indoors or outdoors. The next matter they discuss regarding this hadith, that in some narration, the narration that another narration of the hadith, that it mentioned that what is to be said, إذا دخلتم. The Prophet mentioned another narration of this hadith, where he states in this narration, إذا دخلتم الخلاء, if any of you enter the khala, فقولوا, then you should say, بسم الله أعوذ بالله minal khubthi khaba'ithi. So you have that narration of the hadith, and you find that of the ulama, they mention this hadith in the Abu Mansur, the hadith in the Sa'id ibn Mansur, also the hadith that is said to be found in Abu Hatim and also Ibn Sakan, where they mention concerning that hadith regarding its authenticity. So you find that the likes of the ulama or all the hadith, that it is daif, with that wording regarding, with the inclusion of Bismillah. So the inclusion of Bismillah of the ulama who all that narration, it is weak, and of those who take this position that this additional wording of saying Bismillah, that it is weak, that of those Shaykh Albani rahimullah, of those who take this position, that the tasmiyah, it is something weak, and also others all concerning that all the narrations of this hadith that includes the supplication, including having Bismillah as a part of it, that they are all weak narrations. So the more current narration in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, as we mentioned, there's no mention of Bismillah. And also the books of the Sunan, the more known of books, but some narration does include the addition of Bismillah. But as mentioned, Shaykh Albani rahimahullah and others who state that it is something which is weak narration, say weak narration regarding and considered to be shadh in a narration of Anas ibn Malik with this hadith. So the narrations saying Bismillah are weak, so the person stick to the ones that are authentic, which the Prophet mentioned, that in stating that one should say أعوذ بالله minal khaba'ith, or Allahumma inni bika minal khaba'ith. Also it shows regarding that the air that the person relieve oneself is something considered to be najas, that the air that the person relieve oneself is considered to be najas, and by this the person should seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from and also those places of najasa, also that they are places where the shayateen, that they are present. So the shayateen, that they are present in the places that are said to be najas. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll now discuss concerning the fawaid that can be taken from the hadith in general. So the hadith regarding the main masala or ahkam that can be taken from this hadith is that hadith is discussing regarding what is to be said when the person wishes to relieve oneself. So as we mentioned, saying the dua that has mentioned in the hadith, Allahumma inni bika minal khubthi or billah minal khubthi. As for saying Bismillah, then that narration is daif and not to be said. Then Sheikh of other benefits that can be mentioned, that it shows regarding concerning that there's places that are said to be najas, and these places that because of the impurities that are there and the filth that is there, that the shayateen, that they are present in these places, and of those places regarding the places that people relieve themselves. Also from the hadith that it shows regarding wujub, as the Shaykh mentioned, wujub al-ijtinab al-najasat, that it shows that a person, a Muslim, that it is compulsory for one to avoid things of impurities. So things that are impure, that one should avoid of those things. And also the person taking the necessary means to protect themselves from things of impurity. The person take the necessary step to protect themselves of impurity, mentioned minal khaba'ith. So places of filth and the likes. The Shaykh mentioned concerning al-isti'adha mujma' alayhi, that it is something that for a person to seek refuge, it is something which is mujma alayh, that is something which is mustahab. Regarding that, but that said, other narration of the hadith, with the other narration that we stated before, that the Prophet ﷺ, in that narration, he kind of somewhat give a command in tense in that narration of this hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ, in some narration, I will mention narration of Zayd ibn Arqam, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, where he states, إِذَا أَتَى أَحَدُكُمْ الْخَلَاء فَلْيَقُلْ. So he mentioned فَلْيَقُلْ. So it's something that you should say. But he mentioned that it is mujma alayhi, that as Sheikh Bassami mentioned, that is mujma alayhi, that it is mustahab for a person to say this, indicating that it's not something which is wajib. But inshallah, but another matter to be looked into further. Regarding, is there an opinion of the other ulama that state that it is wajib? So a matter to be looked into further, bidnillahi ta'ala. Also of the benefit that he mentions, so you find that azkar are said when entering certain place, or the use of certain place, that it is at times forbidden, and also and at times it is allowed and encouraged. So the person inside in the masjid, then it's encouraged for the person to use an azkar in entering the masjid, in leaving the masjid, and also there's azkar, and while the person also inside of the masjid. As for the khala, then it is allowed for the person to say something upon entering, and we'll discuss when the person leaves, when he exit. But as for entering, there's a dua to be said before entering. But while the person is inside, as we mentioned, the person should avoid saying anything regarding that concept of things that are said to be, that contain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's dhikr and the likes. So regarding concerning that while inside, then a person should not say things of that includes the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or things of that nature. And the Quran to be read inside, then these things are not to be done. Those things are not to be done while the person is inside the khala, the toilet. Also, regarding this matter of some of the already discussed regarding, if the person, he forgot to say his dua upon entering, before entering, but while inside doing the act, he remembers. So when he enters, he remembers. Either the person can step back, he hasn't started, so he can step back out and say his dua, then re-enter. Then that's an option. So the person can, while inside, but before starting, or start removing of his clothing, he remembers he forgot to say his supplication. So the person can go back out and then go back in saying his dua. Or if the person already start the process of fulfilling his call of nature, then the person at that point, is he allowed? The ulama, they mentioned that of the ulama majority of the person, that he can mention, so the ulama mentioned that the person can say the dua, but in silence. Fi qalbi, as they mention the dhikr, but not verbally, but as they say, silently to himself, he can say it. According to some of the ulama. And some mentioned, so you have the view amongst some of the ulama, that it can still be said, but not verbally, openly, but they said, fi qalbi, in his heart, silently in his heart. So that's concerning the aqwal of the ulama regarding that matter. Then of the benefit, that of the thing that also Sheikh Bassami mentioned regarding concerning that you have those places concerning amkina, place, or makana, amakin, tayyiba, makan that are said to be clean, where the malaika likes to enter into those places, and also amakin, places that are said to be khabith, that are said to be of places of filth, where the shayateen, that they like those places and areas. So it shows regarding the Muslim that whether in our houses, or a place of dwelling, or our general surrounding, that we should try to be people who are clean people, and not people of filth and uncleanliness. So the Muslim try to be people of tidiness, cleanliness, and not people of filth. And that apply regarding in our houses, in our cars, in our work, in our places of work, and our general surrounding, that we try to make them places that are tidy and clean, as places that are unclean, untidy, things that smelly, filth, then those things, it attracts the shayateen. As for things that are clean and tidy, then it attracts the malaika, the angels. Also Sheikh Bassam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned fihi ithbat wujub al-jinn wa shayateen. That also from this hadith, also it shows regarding the existence of the shayateen wal jinn. So the world of the shayateen is a part of the jinn, that this world also, that it exists, that the world, that these are creatures Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have created, that are in existence around us. So the shayateen wal jinn, that the hadith prove that their existence, I mentioned, minal khubthi wal khaba'ithi, the male and female of the shayateen. As for people, as I mentioned, inkaruhum, as for those who deny the existence of the shayateen wal jinn, dhalun wa kufrun, that this is misguidance and kufr. So the person who denies the existence, the total denial of the existence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the shayateen wal jinn, then that is, he mentioned, dhal wa kufr, that is something which is an act of misguidance and also an act of kufr, as nusus, many texts that prove their existence. So these are the general benefit. Then Ibn Malakin, then they mentioned that Anna Ibn Malakin, rahimullah, in his meaning concerning ظاهر from this hadith, أن النبي عليه السلام, that the Prophet عليه السلام كان يجهر بهذا الدعاء, that the Prophet عليه السلام, that he would say this dua verbally. So it wasn't said, so the Prophet عليه السلام would, that so for you find that Anas bin Malik narrating this, then he heard it from the Prophet عليه السلام. So the Prophet عليه السلام would send this, as we will mention, that he will always accompany the Prophet, or at times will accompany the Prophet عليه السلام when he goes to the call, to carry the call of nature. So he heard it from the Prophet عليه السلام. So it shows that the Prophet, so it indicates and it shows that the Prophet ﷺ, that he would say this dua verbally. He would say this open, verbal. So it was something that could be heard. So he'd utter this dua. So the person should utter it, not per se say it silently, or as they say within himself, but he should actually utter the words. Then I mentioned كان يشعر بهذا الدعاء في هذا المكان, in this particular place, وهو أظهر من أنه يخبر عن نفسه من أنه كان يفعله. So it is to be done, as he mentioned, the person should utter this dua openly. So that's concerning of those benefits relating to that particular hadith of Anas bin Malik, where he mentioned the Prophet ﷺ would utter or say this dua before entering the lavatory, the toilet, when one wished to relieve of oneself. So the next hadith that he mentions regarding this particular topic of qada al-aja or the adab, qada al-aja, anhu yani Anas bin Malik, كان رسول الله عليه السلام يدخل الخلاء. The Prophet ﷺ entered the khala, the lavatory, وأحمل, and I mentioned that I, وأنا, وغلام, and another young person, nahwi, of my age, with me, adawatan, will carry something of water, a vessel of water, container of water, وأنذا, and also a spear, وفيستنجي بالماء, and the Prophet ﷺ, that he would make clean of himself with water. They mentioned muttafaqun alayh. So as for the second hadith, which is the hadith of Anas bin Malik, he mentioned muttafaqun alayh, that hadith can be found in Bukhari by way of takhrij, also Muslim, Nasa'i, wal Bayhaqi. So this hadith can be found in other sources. So the hadith is found in Bukhari and Muslim, as I mentioned, muttafaqun alayh, Bukhari and Muslim. Also, in addition, Nasa'i, Bayhaqi, and others who have narrated this hadith, and others who have narrated this hadith. So as for this hadith that have been mentioned here, then as mentioned, كان يدخل الخلاء, that meaning concerning the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he entered al-khala, meaning concerning to know that he intends to enter the khala, then so the Prophet ﷺ intending to attend al-khala, so this so Anas bin Malik would accompany the Prophet ﷺ, and also mentioned gulam nahwi, then he mentioned a young boy with me. So it mentioned regarding concerning ulama that they discussed regarding gulam ma'i. So regarding concerning a young boy with him, of the ulama say that it was Ibn Mas'ud. So I mentioned that the person, this other young person with Anas bin Malik that accompanied him, that he didn't mention, he mentioned as Ghulam, that is other person, what is? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But of the ulama mentioned that's not the case, as Ibn Mas'ud was a much older person, not a young person. He mentioned Ghulam, indicating as a young boy. But Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, of those that accepted Islam early, and a much more grown person, mature person, older person in age. So they mentioned that Ibn Abdullah bin Mas'ud is not the person that was accompanying Anas bin Malik. Then they mentioned, as for Ghulam, that they mentioned concerning Al-Ghulam, they mentioned that a young boy, that I mentioned that about the age, up to the age of 7, a young person around the age of 7. Some mention that Al-Ghulam, that a young person who have not yet started growing beard. But overall, I mentioned Ghulam in the sense of a young boy around the at a young age, at a young age. Did I mention Nahwi? Did I mention Nahwi concerning that in the Muslim? So it's the narration when he mentioned فَأَحْمَلْ أَنَا وَغُلَامْ Nahwi. As for this word Nahwi, that is in Sahih Muslim, but not in Bukhari. That wording, Nahwi, Ghulam, Nahwi, it is found, that is like him, it is found in the narration of Sahih Muslim, but it is not mentioned in the Bukhari. Meaning concerning Nahwi, that that of similar age. That is person I mentioned of similar age. So this person that was with me, alongside with me, that person also of similar age, and also a free person. That you find that Ibn Malik rahimahullah, regards, I mentioned that that similar age and also of a free person, as mentioned by others. So someone similar to him in age that was alongside with him. Then I mentioned that he carries adawa or idawa. So idawatan minal ma, idawatan min ma. That he carried a vessel that also a container which contains water. So add a container that add water. Also, they mentioned a young boy also from the Ansar. So just to add that they mentioned that in some narration of hadith, they mentioned that this young person mentioned that minal Ansar. So in some narration, they mentioned minal Ansar, that that young boy was from someone from the Ansar that was with Ibn Mas'ud. Oh, sorry, that was with Anas bin Malik. So they mentioned idawa. They mentioned that it's a small leather container of water. Something's of leather, a container that was made of leather that was used to carry water, as it mentioned. Then they mentioned anaza. They discussed concerning anaza, that they mentioned harbat al-saghira, that's like a small spear. So like a small spear that that they also took alongside with them. Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan mentioned كان النجاشي أداها للنبي عليه السلام, that the Najashi was the one who gave the gift to the Prophet عليه السلام. That فقال فكانت تقوم بين يديه إذا خرج إلى مصلى. The Prophet عليه السلام also, he would take this with him whenever he goes to the مصلى, this small spear. And also the Khulafa, that they also had it as the Prophet عليه السلام, that this anaza, they mentioned that of those who hold that it is considered to be a small spear, and also those who mention asa, that a form of like a staff. It's like a staff. So you have those who mention a spear, and also those who mention that is a staff. So khilaf between the ulama as to, but anaza as to. Then Ibn Malik rahimahullah, he mentioned the various benefits of the Prophet ﷺ, that he would carry this. That he mentioned the various benefits of carrying like this object, this spear with him. That now rahimahullah, you find of the ulama who kind of somewhat that more inclined towards it was asa, tawil, but those who mentioned was a spear, a small spear that he would carry alongside with him whenever he went for this. They mention concerns of the reason why regarding concerning anaza, of his benefit, that daf al-udu, used kind of somewhat to protect oneself from one enemy, or even from that of wild animals. Also, the Prophet ﷺ at times uses a sutra, something that is placed in front of him whenever he prays. Also, he would use it regarding concerning that, that for other benefits concerning that. So he would take this alongside with him. So a form of maybe use as at times as protection, and also use to help him regarding softening the earth that he wished to, the ear that he used to wish to use. So it come with different benefit. So regarding the dimension, yastanji bilma, the Prophet Islam, that he would make istinja, which is a way of cleaning of oneself. So istinja is the person cleaning of oneself, washing of self after the person have done what we said, not the person have either defecate or urinate. So after the person have used a number one, as we say, or number two, right, pass of stool or pass of urine, then a person would wash off themselves. So concerning istinja is of those acts that a person will perform after the person have carried out the acts of nature. So they mentioned regarding concerning that in this matter, the part that they mentioned istinja. So you find certain words that are used regarding the act of qada al-haja. So that the word that is used, istinja, istijmar, tatib, istitaba. So the ulama in the books of fiqh, that they interchange these words, indicating the matter relating to the person carrying the act of nature and clean of themselves. Istitaba, istinja, istijmar. So istitaba is the person that clean of oneself after the call of nature. Also istijmar, that istinja is the person using, they mentioned concerning istinja is with a person the use of water to clean themselves. So istijma is the using of istinja is the use of water after cleaning oneself, and istijmar is the person using of stones. So that's the different wording. So all of these are words that are used with the use of ahjar is regarding istijmar, istinja, the use of water. Istitaba is the person using either water or stone. Water or stone. Then the ulama have a discussion regarding concerning, as Sheikh Bassam and others also mentioned regarding concerning that the act regarding that the act of istinja or istitaba, clean of oneself after the act of nature. Then it mentions that on this matter that istinja, istitaba, you have different ways in which it can be done. So he mentioned 3 ways of the person cleaning of oneself after the call of nature. So 3 ways of cleaning the act of the area that has been used. So the area that the person, so with this, they mention 1. Afdal is al-jam bayna, they said hijara wal ma. So we say today, in a sense of what is better for the person to use paper or stone, then followed after by washing. So they mentioned that. So the first in this of combining between the use of paper, tissue, or stone, or leaf, or whatever the person chooses to use, then after it will be followed with water. So that's the best way. They mentioned that's the more suitable and the better way to clean off oneself. So the person will start first to remove, regarding concern if number 2, to remove the stool. So clean that area, and then after followed with water. Then that's concerning that method. Then he mentioned أنه رحمه الله حافظ أو أنه رحمه الله mentioned الذي عليه جماعة السلف والخلف أجمع عليه أهل الفتوى وأئمة الأمصار أن الأفضل أن يجمع بين الماء والحجارة. So أنه رحمه الله, that is mentioned to know what the ulama, as he mentioned, that it's agreed upon between the ulama that is preferred for a person to use water and stone or tissue together. Then a second method that he mentions of cleaning of oneself. So the first method, paper, stone, then water. the second method is mentioned يأتي بعده, what comes after this, في فضيلة, in what is the more preferred method of cleaning of oneself. He mentioned اقتصار على الماء دون الحجارة, the person only using water without using any form of stone or paper. So the person didn't use tissue, the person has used only use water. Then I mentioned that comes second in line of the best way to clean oneself. So the person only using of water. This will mean in that case that more so regarding of number 2, the person cleaning of stool, that a person then is own enough to touch that area, that filth. But I mentioned is something which is jaiz. It is jaiz to do so. So that's the second method. So I mentioned that it comes second in line of the best way to clean off oneself, which is the person only using of water to clean the filth. Then the third in line, they mention al-ikhtisar al-hijara wa nahwi, that a person also just limit himself to use of hijara and what is similar. So I said in today's time we'll use of toilet paper or toilet tissue, then a person will use of these things. So that would be the person only using, for example, toilet paper, or the person is outside in the forest wilderness and he only use leaves, or the person only use stones, suitable stones, then that also is sufficient for the person to have performed the act, to be said to have performed the act of istinja, of cleaning of oneself. But I mentioned فهي مجزية, that method of only using stones or paper is said to be mujziyah. It is said to be sufficient. It is sufficient in cleaning of oneself. But it comes third in line. It comes third in line. So if the person was just to use the toilet, so that also would include with a number 2 or a number 1. So the person was to do a urinate and he didn't wash that area. So with urinating, the person generally would just wash the area of the male or the female without them using paper. But if they would use paper, then they'll wash even with the front. But that may be, but if the person would just use water, then that's sufficient. Or the person with urinating was only to use paper, he just wiped that area. The person in the airport, in the public lavatory, he doesn't have water as he's in a lavatory, there's only paper, he only used the paper to clean himself, then that's satisfactory. So sometimes they will wet the paper with the water and then use it, then that's okay also. Then that's okay, sufficient. So if the person will just use a dry paper to wipe themselves after urinating, then that also is sufficient. So using just a dry toilet tissue to clean oneself, then this also is sufficient. Or the person using a stone, then this also is sufficient without any water. So that's concerning, they show the permissibility regarding that these ways are different ways in cleaning of oneself after relieving of oneself. So it shows regarding that Islam that it emphasizes regarding the Muslim being a state of cleaning of oneself after the call of nature. After the call of nature to ensure the person that he cleans of himself and clean that area, contrary to what we may say in certain societies where people, when they urinate, there's no cleaning. So after urinating, there's no cleaning of that area. They just return their private parts into their pants without any form of cleaning. So I said Islam is contrary to this. Islam is contrary to this, but the person should clean whether the front or the back after those areas have been used. Then I mentioned that بعض ulama, of the ulama, that they dislike istinja al-ma, dislike using concerning that dislike concerning istinja with way of water. They dislike of this. Then I can somewhat respond regarding to that they mentioned that qawl da'if. That qawl da'if, you have a discussion between the ulama on that matter, but I mentioned that qawl is one which is a weak position of those who have taken a position regarding that, as mentioned, فَقَدْ كَرِيَ ذَلِكَ بَعْضُ الْعُلَمَاء. Regarding concern a person that restricting oneself to these to water by the person of his use of water, then it means the person have to touch the private, the back area with the najasa there, the impurities there. So can somewhat dislike the person to touch also that area and clean themselves with water only. So they take the position as something which is dislike. So that's a position taken by some of the ulama that that view of dislike, it is mansub ila qawl. It is said to be the qawl of Hudayfa al-Yaman, Ibn Umar and Ibn Zubair amongst the Sahaba. And also Ibn Tin and Malik annahu ankar, that Ibn Malik also may not be of that dislike the use of this. There's some discussion regarding those athar on this matter, regarding those athar going back to those Sahaba that I mentioned regarding concerning that on this matter. So general of those concerning these athar, that some of those that they are authentic regarding Hudayfa ibn Yaman wa Ibn Umar wa Ibn Zubair, that they dislike the person use of water only to clean of themselves, as it means the person would have to touch that physically touch those najasa. So the awlat is something which is dislike. But overall I mentioned to know that it is still permissible with dislike, but overall is something which is allowed, as that's the position taken by Jumhur of the ulama. So Jumhur of the ulama, they take the position as something which is still allowed without any form of dislike, as the person doing the water, that both everything is still washed. The najasa is removed from that area and also from the person's hand. So they mentioned that it is something which is still allowed to be done. It is still allowed to be done without any form of dislike to this, without any form of dislike. So as concerning that matter, the Prophet, so with this, as I mentioned, at least in this case of the hadith of Anas bin Malik yastanji bil ma. So the Prophet mentioned yastanji bil ma, no mention of other things being used alongside with water. So it shows that there's same thing which is permissible. And also the hadith of the Prophet it shows regarding that of the other benefit that can be taken from the hadith, as mentioned by some who have explained this hadith, that it mentioned regarding concerning that Anas bin Malik anhu, being of a young person that the age 10 or around that age, that he was the one who will assist the Prophet ﷺ regarding certain basic with certain things. So it showed that a young person assisting the Prophet ﷺ and assisting someone regarding certain matters, then it's something which is permissible and allowed. Also it showed that Anas bin Malik in this case, that he had someone alongside with him, assisting him with him. Ibn Mulakin mentioned that either could be that with Anas bin Malik and that other young person that was with him, either one was carrying one thing and the other carrying another thing. One was carrying the water and the other carrying the spear, or one just accompanying the other. So whichever way, both were present on this particular task. So that more than one person being involved, then that also is permissible to assist someone. Also, it shows regarding concerning that with this hadith also, it shows the permissibility regarding that of relieving of oneself. Then also that process will include that the person also have to make istinja after. So when the person relieve of oneself, then those areas, whether from the front or the back area, that they are to be also to be washed and to be wiped, they are to be cleaned. That's a part of the act of al-istinja, or the act of qada al-haja. And also they mentioned that with this also the Prophet that with this also the Prophet that it will remove that distance himself regarding concerning so people couldn't see him directly. So and that will be discussed further inshallah ta'ala. So it shows regarding this hadith shows these benefit, but I said this hadith is regarding it shows regarding the hadith is that and also the hadith that a person and wish to carry out this act, that also to either themselves or others, that having certain things prepared and ready. So having the water ready and things ready to the person, so as the facility for the person that they're able to can carry out this act of nature for them, and also that they're able to can cleanse themselves immediately after in the same area without exposing of themselves. So having things ready in place, so as soon as the person end carrying this act of nature, then they also can clean themselves with the appropriate things, with a water or paper that they are also prepared and ready. So it shows regarding that now. So these are the benefits that can be taken from this particular hadith, where, as we mentioned, this hadith is within the chapter regarding Bab, Adab, Qada al-Haja, where we discuss Islam clarified to the Muslim regarding this act of Qada al-Haja, and this also attached to things of carrying out acts of ibadat, and also regarding general cleanliness that is expected from the Muslim, that so Islam and the ulama, they discuss it as its own chapter to clarify these things and to re-emphasize and to educate the Muslim and others on this particular topic. So this inshallah ta'ala will end this discussion. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهادي إلى السبيل والآخرة ورحمة الأمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, how long?